Hi, this is David Healy at Libre. In this video we're going to take a look at the shepherd's flute. This is a Bulgarian kaval flute, which is a kind of end-blown flute, and it's an instrument that is culturally significant in Bulgaria. It's associated with shepherds tending their flocks and entertaining themselves by performing this instrument. So we'll start by looking at the interface and then we'll have a listen to some of the sounds. So it's running inside the Rhapsody player. This is the free player plugin available from the Libre website. There's a link below this video if you're watching it on YouTube. So in the top left corner we have the velocity response table. So here we can control the velocity level. So we can add nodes to this table by clicking and we can drag them around. We can remove them by right clicking on them. And if we want to adjust the curve between two nodes, we can hold right click and move the mouse up and down. The line in the middle shows the current velocity level, so if I play a note, we'll see that move. So that's low velocity, and that's a higher velocity. If we were to do something like this, now every note will be played at the maximum velocity. And if we were to pull them down like that, everything's going to be played at the lowest velocity. Okay, in the centre of the UI we have the articulation list. And we'll take a listen to all of these soon, but for now I'll just show you how it works. So we can click on each one to change that articulation. We can also use the key switch, and the key switch names are here, to change the articulation, and they also show up down here on the keyboard. The little slider to the right of each articulation can be used to control its volume. And that allows you to internally balance all of the different articulations with one another. But out of the box they should be pretty well balanced anyway, so that's just if you want a bit more fine control. Over at the right we have the dynamic section, so we can use the mod wheel to control dynamics. It's assigned to mod wheel by default, but you can right click on this and use Learn MIDI CC or assign a CC from the pop-up menu. But by default it's set to CC1, which is the mod wheel. As you can hear, the dynamic crossfades in this library are really smooth, and that's because we've phase aligned the three dynamic layers. So that avoids some of that chorusing effect you sometimes hear when you're crossfading between different dynamic layers. With this library, it's really smooth and really realistic. The expression knob is just a volume knob, and that's controlled by CC11 by default. Again, you can reassign that from the right-click menu. So this is a sub-volume control that affects the instrument before the master volume that we have down here. Below the dynamics, we have the vibrato section, and we have a rate control that controls the speed of the vibrato, and we have the depth control that controls the amount of vibrato. And if we go back over to the left side of the interface, we have the HDSR controls, and this is just a gain envelope. And it doesn't affect the performance articulation because this articulation has its envelope sort of built in internally, and it adapts to your playing style. We'll look at that in a bit more detail in a moment. So it's grayed out for the performance articulation, but if we go to any of the other articulations, it's active and we can change its values there. So we could change the attack and the hold, for example, and then if we change to another articulation, that's going to have its own envelope, so that's going to have different values. Okay, moving up to the top, we've got the Rhapsody button. So clicking this will take you back to the main Rhapsody interface where you can manage your libraries, add new ones, uninstall them, or load a different library if you want. The cog icon, that's going to open the settings panel where there's various settings to choose from. If you're running the plugin version of Rhapsody, then in the audio tab you'll see all of these will say unavailable or no options, something like that. And that's because that will be handled by the plugin host. But if you're in the standalone version of Rhapsody, like I am now, then as you can see, these are populated. Okay, then we have the preset browser. There's only one default preset with the shepherd's flute, but you can, of course, add your own. And you can load the previous preset, the next preset, or save the current preset directly from the main interface, so you don't have to open the preset browser to do that. Okay, let's talk about these articulations then. So the performance articulation is where most of the fun is. So you can play this articulation, it's designed to be performed, hence the name, and it will interpret your performance to create realistic legato transitions, trills, and different articulations and ornaments. So if I play in a flowing legato style, so that means I'm not releasing the previous key until the next one has been held down, it will play a transition between them. Let's turn the dynamic up a bit there. So you can hear we get those nice legato transitions, and if I play faster, it's going to transition more quickly. If I hold down my sustain pedal, so that's CC64, and play a legato transition, we'll actually get a glide between two notes. Now, gliding a span of a fourth like that is a bit unrealistic on this particular instrument. You're more likely just to go up to maybe a second. But of course, this is a virtual instrument, so we can do what we like, really. So we could do something totally unbelievable like that. The flexibility is there for you to use this how you want. But if you're going for realism, then you're probably going to want to stick to a smaller interval. Another way to bend notes, and something that is maybe a bit easier to perform, is to use the pitch wheel. With the performance articulation, the attack of the note is greatly dependent on the velocity that you play at. So if you play a low velocity, you're going to get a slower attack. So you can see the velocity I'm playing up here in the velocity response table. And if I play a higher velocity, I'm going to get a harder attack. To perform trills, or tremolos, whatever you prefer to call them, of any interval, you can just play one note and just hold it down while you press and release another note. And of course, in a true performance, you bring all this together, the pitch bends, the velocity, the dynamics, and the legato and the trills and all of that. Okay, let's move on to the staccato. So I'm just going to double click these controls to reset the envelope shape. So with the staccato, we have just these short notes with the dynamic controlled by velocity. With the first octave from C3 up to B3, playing at the highest velocity will trigger a spiccato articulation. The staccatissimo is again a short articulation, it's about half the duration of the staccato. And again, its dynamic level is controlled by velocity. You may have noticed with this articulation and the staccato, and we're going to see it with some of the others, that we have this blue key switch here on C1. If we press that, it will re-trigger the last note that was played. So this is useful if you want to do a real-time double tonguing, for example. If we go to the overblown sustain articulation, this has an overblown attack which is controlled by velocity, and it goes into a sustain sound which can have its dynamics controlled with the dynamics knob over here. We've got these vocal articulations which have the note playing and then vocalizations playing over the top of them. So the musician is actually vocalizing while playing the note. And with some instruments that can do all kinds of interesting harmonies. With the shepherd's flute, they're just doing the same tone as the instrument. Now with these, the range that was actually played by the musician is more limited just because of the sound quality, but again, we're in the virtual world, we can do what we want, so we've extended the range to match the other articulations, but it is the upper sample that's been stretched higher, so as you go higher up the keyboard it's going to get a bit more unrealistic, but it's still an interesting sound. And then the staccato, same thing, but shorter notes. And staccatissimo, even shorter notes. And finally we have the finger taps, which is just as it sounds, it's the fingers tapping on the sound holes of the instrument. So a nice little effect there that you can mix into your music. One thing I forgot to mention with the performance articulation is you can play chords. So we can go from smooth legato into a chord. Now you do have to be a bit careful with how you play this, because if you play the notes of the chord too slowly, so there's a larger time interval between two of the notes, then the instrument's going to think you're playing a legato transition. So you do have to try and get all the notes down at the same time, as opposed to, and then you're going to get legato. So as is kind of standard with Libre wave instruments, this one was recorded very dry and close, because what we're trying to capture is not a performance. We're trying to capture the instrument so that you can play it to create a performance. So we're not interested so much in the room sound. So what we've been hearing so far has actually been running through a reverb and spatialization plugin, which I'm going to turn off now so we can hear the dry sound. So this is what you're going to hear out of the box. So as you can hear, it's a bone dry sound. It's what I like really, because it gives you so much flexibility with how you position this in your mix. But it does mean out of the box it sounds a bit naked, and it needs a bit of spatialization and reverb adding there, just to give it a bit more depth and fullness. But what this means is you're playing the instrument, you're not playing the room. So that was an overview of the shepherd's flute. This is available now at librewave.com. There's a link in the description below the video on YouTube. If you've got any questions or comments, please do leave them below. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.